Hello, I'm Joan Brown. It's my great pleasure to host this segment of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 140 Marin women of distinction, women who have made immense contributions to the County of Marin and its residents, as well as to the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business, philanthropy, the arts, politics, law, philosophy, health, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in our community. It's a great privilege to acknowledge and document their contributions. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Cheryl Sorokin, who's being honored in 2019 for her remarkable work in governance in the business world and nonprofits. So Cheryl, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And let's begin with how it all began. Can we hear about your family, your childhood, what experiences and people in your life influenced you to get where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I was raised in the Midwest. My dad was a professor at Northwestern University School of Journalism. My mom was a stay-at-home mom mainly because she had trouble with childbirth and had issues that kept her at home for a while. But she was a great influence in my life as a feminist and as a member of AAUW, which is one of the big influences in my life. In fact, I was surrounded by AAUW women as I was growing up, and they taught me about independence and perseverance and being your own person. And I like to say I was raised by AAUW women. And similarly, my father was a really big influence because in addition to his efforts at instilling a love for academics and writing and reading in us, and the idea of being persistent, he ran a program for the U.S. government that brought journalists from around the world, especially from war-torn places, and educated them on the role of the free press in America. And so we had people from all over the world in our home as I was growing up, and it was my introduction really to international relations, to understanding cultures of other worlds, and also learning about discrimination and issues that affected people not only in our country but in countries abroad. And they were both powerful influences on me. I also had a theater background as a child growing up. I was in a program at Northwestern that Northwestern offered in the public schools called Creative Dramatics, and so I became a little theater lover from the 4th grade on, or actually maybe even from younger than that. And that's also been a powerful influence in my life, learning to act on stage and also to do things behind the scenes. I made all the costumes one year for my high school play, Oklahoma. So I learned to sew. So
Great.
Yeah. So
Great. You talk about leaving a successful career in teaching and moving into the law. A field that was dominated by men and still may be. So what was it like investigating the change in your career and when you got into it and what motivated you to make the switch?
Well, I was a Spanish teacher for 9 years. When I was in high school, that was back in the Sputnik era. In Indiana, at that time, was a pretty progressive state, and it had a program for high school students to encourage high schools to offer 3rd and 4th year in a foreign language. So I applied for that program. I went and studied abroad, lived with a family in Mexico for 2 summers, came back and went through 3rd and 4th year in high school, and then got my degree in college in Spanish and went to start teaching. And I taught at all these different levels: university level, elementary school level, and finally junior high and high school. But I was never really satisfied with it as a career, and had a friend whose husband was in law school, and the two of us used to say, well, hey, we could do that. So took the LSAT and got into Northwestern University, which was a lovely law school, and I really am most appreciative to the kind of education that I got there as a lawyer. And I didn't realize, I didn't go to law school because I wanted to become Perry Mason or because I had any great aspirations in working in a particular field. After I got out of law school, I really discovered how much bias there was against women. And I went as an older woman, because I'd already been teaching out as in a career. And I discovered that law firms were not really interested, number one, in women, and especially number two, in older women.
And so what year was this?
This was
how old were you?
So I was in my early 30s. I think I graduated when I was 31 or 32. And the year was 77. And yeah, 77 is when I graduated. So I switched from looking at law firms to looking at corporations as a place to practice law. And in Chicago, the biggest corporate employer was in legal department was Standard Oil. And I interviewed with them. I still remember the interview to this day, because I walked into what is essentially their boardroom, and the table was full of men. I mean, there must have been 19 guys there.
And no
women, right, who interviewed me. And I was of interest to them because I spoke Spanish. They had a lot of property in South America. They didn't want me to go to South America, though. They wanted me to work in Chicago. And I was more interested in, could I have some travel experience and use my language skills that way. I also interviewed on the opposite end of the scale with Bank of America, which had a very teeny little office in Chicago. Back then it was before branch banking. And so they had what they called a loan production office, sort of a euphemism for almost a branch, but not quite. And they had a very small legal department that they were just starting. I think I was the third hire. And I had worked there in the summer and really enjoyed it.
As an intern?
As an intern between my second and third year. And I wasn't sure that they were going to hire anybody else because the office was so small. But they did eventually, and I was that person, so I got that
And
job.
were you the first woman?
No, I wasn't the first woman in that particular position. Bank of America has had a lot of women employees over the years, but mainly in lower level positions. They were, in fact, under a consent decree when I was hired. I don't think it had much to do with the Chicago office. The consent decree was really, although it was worldwide, it was really focusing on the fact that they had no managers in California that were women, or hadn't had very many. So anyway, that's how I switched, and it was, Bank of America made a huge effort to train me, and I was very grateful to them for that. It was wonderful to be treated as somebody who knew something from the very beginning, even though I knew very little at the beginning. But I enjoyed that very much. And when I got divorced in the early,
you had a son.
I had a son. Yes, my husband.
When you
I had
were
a son
in law school.
When I had him before I went to law school. Had him quite early on in my marriage. Back then, that was not like today, right? I had a kid at 20. What did I know? But anyway, I went to law school. David was, I think, in second or third grade while I was in law school. Third, fourth, and fifth grade while I was in law school, And my husband was very supportive, I have to say. He was supportive of my going to law school. I didn't have to get any debt to go. We had the funds to pay for it. And my son was quite supportive as a young kid. But my husband and I did divorce in the early 80s, and Bank of America said, wow, this is great. We can move her, and we don't have to find her husband a job. And so I was interested in moving, and because the office was very small in Chicago, and the only really upward trajectory was to go to California or go abroad with Bank of America or change jobs. And I was interested in actually staying with the bank. I liked the profession, working with them. And they offered me a job in Mexico City. And I was thrilled because I could use my Spanish. And I had gone with the bank several backup situations where I'd gone to replace lawyers in Venezuela, in our office in Venezuela and in Mexico. And so I was familiar with the office, and I liked the work. And I thought, this is great. And I got my son excited about moving. He was a freshman and going to be a sophomore in high school. I got my ex-husband by that time to say it was okay to move my kid. Went down on a house hunting trip to Mexico City, and the head of the business office in Mexico called me into his office the very first day I was there and said, I'm sorry you can't be the head of the office because you're a woman. Now, that was an unexpected barrier, and I was quite taken aback. The guy knew me. I had been there before. He was perfectly happy to have me come and work in the office, but not be the head lawyer in the office. And so I got on the phone, called the general counsel and said, George, we have a problem here. Having just been through a divorce, having just gotten my kid all excited about moving, I didn't really want to be in a work position where I knew that I'd have to be battling every single day, and where somebody was intent on my failing because he didn't want me in that position. So again, the bank was very good to me. They moved me to a different position. I tried first Los Angeles and didn't like the smog, and then they found a position for me in San Francisco, which is how I got to San Francisco.
And you were doing what kind of law for them?
So when I started, I was doing what they call large corporate loans and lending, leasing. And when I moved to California, I was switched to the other side of the bank, which is called the retail side of the bank. So that was product development. We were developing, at that time, home equity loans and home banking, telephone banking, those kinds of things. We were just starting to be able to pay interest on checking accounts. This seems very long ago, doesn't it? And so I worked on those kinds of legal issues. And then also, I was very fortunate. I was offered a position of trying to create a program where our paralegals could take phone calls on legal issues from the branches. So when the sheriff showed up at the door and demanded, all the typewriters, or demanded something, instead of having to talk to a lawyer who may or may not have been familiar with California law on that subject, I helped them put together a program, and I taught a lot of bankers and lawyers about basic legal issues in running a retail operation. Again,
so that was systematic mentoring.
It was, yeah, right, yeah, exactly. But I wasn't all that happy with that job either, and I just sort of mentioned at one point that I might be interested in moving into the corporate secretary job, and shortly thereafter, somebody asked me to interview for that.
So tell us what a corporate secretary is.
So I've been answering this question for my entire life, and I still don't have a really short answer.
That's okay.
But it is generally a fairly senior executive position in a corporation that provides really high-level service to the CEO, the management team, and the board of directors, and in public companies also to shareholders. It has to do with the governance of the organization. And corporate governance is the sum total of all of the concepts and regulations and practices and things that legal requirements, traditions even in a company that are involved in the management and the board of directors doing what is their fiduciary duty in running the company. So that's really what a corporate secretary is. It ranges from very mundane tasks to very important sort of counseling and advice tasks.
Is it usually a lawyer?
It's often a lawyer, almost always a lawyer. Didn't used to be, but even the people who were not lawyers got very, very, very familiar with legal issues.
So when you got the opportunity to do that, you were the first woman?
At Bank of America, I was the first woman in this job, and it was not without great controversy because the job had always been a lawyer from the legal department. It had been a rotating position. I think I was the only woman up for the job. There were two other men. And I'm not sure why I got the position at that particular time, but I think in part it was because I was able to bring to bear a lot of skills that other guys just didn't have. My ex-husband had been head of van line, kind of Allied Van Lines, and had worked with the board of directors. And as his corporate spouse, I got to see how boards of directors operated, how the care and feeding of directors, the working with the management team on making sure that directors knew what they were doing. I knew a lot of that, so I was able to bring that to the interview and to talk about my skills that way. Also, I'm a very good listener, even though I'm talking a lot now.
Well, this is your job right now.
But I'm a very good listener, and I think a lot of that had to do with it. As a corporate secretary, the really good corporate secretaries are excellent listeners. Your job is to facilitate other people being successful, really. And a large part of what you do is relationship building with some very high-powered people, and that takes a lot of listening skills, and you've got to sublimate your own ego a lot of times. So I think I brought that to the job. But there was a lot of discussion about whether I could survive conversations where there were swear words or where people behaved badly to each other. And it's amazing, men do behave badly to each other in high-powered situations. But I got the job and ended up converting it into not a rotating position. I was in the position for about 12 years, yeah.
So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. They're all very different types of
And you
men.
moved it from the legal department.
To reporting to the CEO, right, that happened.
How far into that did that happen?
I think it was the second, maybe the third CEO. I started when Sam Armacost was CEO, and then Tom Clausen when he returned, and then Dick Rosenberg, and then Dave Coulter. So I went through all four, and they're all very different types of bosses and workers, but they were all great mentors to me. I have to say I'm very pleased with the level of really sensitivity and care that they had as managers, and for me in the position as being the only woman in the room for many, many years.
And when you retired, how many other women were at that top corporate level in that room?
Well, in the process, we had acquired Security Pacific, and Kathy Burke became the first woman vice chair there. And there were probably 5 other women who were in executive vice president roles.
Out of how many?
Maybe out of 30 top people, yeah.
Interesting.
Still a lot of fewer women in the roles than men.
So, you are, in your retirement,
Yes.
president of Marin Villages.
Right.
And the national secretary for AAUW.
Right.
So I would really like to hear about these involvements, what you bring to them, what you're observing, and how that's in your life now.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely retired because I still do consulting on corporate governance work, and I bring a lot of that to the work that I'm doing with both Marin Villages and AAUW. AAUW, again, was such a powerful influence in my life. It works for gender equity, especially for women and girls. Always has. We're one of the largest scholarship grantors for fellowships for women for senior PhD and doctorate work.
Nationally?
Nationally. And we have branches in every state. We have organizations in every congressional district. It has the potential to be a really powerful organization, and it's gotten re-energized lately. And I'm so proud to be part of that re-energizing at the national board level. And Marin Villages is, again, the opposite.
Wait. Before we go to Marin Villages,
all right.
AAUW. My mom was AAUW. I think, there's a lot of many women are not stay-at-home moms anymore and are working. And so how is AAUW dealing with the challenge of having university women graduates who have full careers and families still have time to volunteer and be in AAUW?
It's a big issue for all membership organizations and really for all sort of professional organizations, frankly, that seek to get professional women involved. When I started, there were no professional lawyers groups for women. There were no professional banking groups for women that wanted women in them. The only really big professional group or opportunity for women that had any intellectual heft to it was AAUW. Essentially, that was it.
And League of Women Voters.
And League of Women Voters, which has a very different focus than AAUW.
Right.
It's much more tied to specifically to the political, to voting and issues that our governments are addressing. So we struggle with it. And I have to say, we have a new CEO, Kim Churches, who's really working on that issue. And trying to get young people to sign up is hard for anything. They don't like to sign up for anything. They don't like to go to meetings. They like projects. And so we're moving into that project base. We just put out a new program called Work Smart that's a free online program on how to negotiate your salary. And a lot of women are working with us on that, young women, and getting that message out to people, take this free online program and learn more about how not to just go in and say thank you when somebody offers you the salary, but say, hey, I'm worth more, and here's why. And this is what I value, and be able to walk away from a job if it's not offering you what you want.
So, again, would you just, for the viewers, say the name and how they can find it?
So Work Smart is the name of the program, and it's an online program. If you go to aauw.org and type in Work Smart, it will bring that program up, and it's free.
And another program that AAUW does has to do with girls in technology, the summer thing at Stanford. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, in California, an AAUW member about 10 years ago, or maybe 12 years ago now, started a summer camp program to encourage young girls, 7th grade girls going into 8th grade, to stay interested in science and math and technology. And so, and now it's spread from STEM to STEAM because we've added in arts, because a lot of what we do now digitally in the art world is really related to science as well. So AAUW offers 10 camps in California in the summer, week-long. They're all by scholarship, by donation. So the branches, the local AAUW groups raise money to send girls from their communities to these camps. And we have one, the one that we send girls to is on the Stanford campus, but it's a program run by AAUW, by women, scientists and mathematicians and teachers, people who are in the science field. And 9 girls, or 8 girls, I think we send from Marin branch, and there's a Novato branch that sends another 8 or 9 girls also to these STEM camps. And they're great because they help, you know, right about that time is when girls start to lose interest in science and math, and it's proven if you keep supporting them, then they stay. And those are, of course, among the highest paying fields now for women.
So has there been any follow-up in the 10 years? And what does it show?
The success rate is very high that women and girls stay engaged in science and math 10 years out after the program. So that's getting through their college years and into careers in science and math. Now, the keeping women in science and math long-term career has been difficult because there's still a lot of inequity, still a lot of prejudice against women, and in certain fields. Not so much in the biology fields, but in chemistry, physics, mathematics, those fields, there are real issues still.
So I didn't mean to cut you off before about Marin Villages, but I wanted to go deeper with these terrific programs that AAUW is doing.
Right.
So talk a little bit about Marin Villages.
So Marin Villages it's not a place. I want to start that right out. We help older adults stay active and connected and independent in the place they call home. So in their own home, or if they've moved to a retirement center, we work with them also in that place as well. Or if they're in an apartment, we work with them. But it was designed really for people who wanted to stay in their family home as they aged. Maybe they can't drive anymore, maybe they can't get up on a stepladder and change the light bulb. So we have volunteers who do those things. So the members join for about $1 a day, and then our volunteers provide these kinds of services. And also, interestingly, we like to say a ride is more than a ride. Right. It's not just about being an Uber driver to get you to Kaiser. It's about a friend who comes and gets to know you and understands what you're going through and takes you also to social events and keeps you active in the community. And I joined it when my second husband was fading, dying physically, and couldn't get out. And Marin Villages helped me find somebody to come into the house and play chess with him, because he was still very intellectually engaged. He just physically couldn't get out. So that's how I got involved. And then sort of after he passed away, they said, oh, well, so what are you doing with your time? So I got involved again in that. And it's such an important thing in Marin, because Marin has a aging population. We are the oldest county, I think, in California in terms of our population's age, and it's only going to increase. And the county can't do it all itself, cannot provide services for everybody. So we have to harness the power of the volunteer community in Marin, and that's what Marin Villages does.
And so Marin Villages' website is?
It's marinvillages.org.
Great,
yeah.
great.
All one word, marinvillages.org.
So you've had mentors in your life. What have you learned about mentorship, and what can you share about what makes a good mentor?
Well, I think the first thing is that a good mentor cares about making you a success. It's not about them being a good mentor. It's about you being a success. And so they are looking for ways to help you. I try that myself when I'm working with other people. I try to be the example, but not the person who says you must do this or you must do that, but here's a suggestion for how you might face this issue. Why don't you try this approach? And if that doesn't work, let's try something else. I think that's the key thing to being a good mentor is accepting, saying to the person, hey, you're worth mentoring. I think you've got it. I'm interested in your career and I want to help you, but it's about you taking advantage of sort of the advice that I give you, not me spouting the advice. It's about you operating yourself, taking charge yourself, and then coming to me for, well, that didn't work. How did you deal with a situation like that?
Have you had experiences where you've had a formal thing where someone has said, I'd like you to be my mentor, or has it mostly just kind of morphed?
I did once. The Dominican University had a program where they were looking for mentors, and I did a mentorship of a young man in his senior year, and that was a formal mentor arrangement. A certain number of days a week, you had to talk, to each other and things like that. I found that less successful because I don't think he really wanted to mentor, but he had to check the box. But on the other hand, we did get to know each other pretty well at the end, and I think I was able to offer him some advice that he actually did take and put to work, and then came back and said, this is how it worked for me. So I think it worked all right. It was probably the least successful of in my mind, of the things I've done.
So just kind of as a wrap up, what are some of your hopes and what needs do you see to be addressed in Marin County?
Well, we're privileged to live in Marin, so we have to say that at the beginning. But there are many, many issues here that disturb me. For one thing, although we have a fair amount of diversity, we are still very segregated in how we live and how we play and how we interact with each other. And I think it's a problem that we haven't adequately addressed in Marin. The other issue is the aging population and housing. I think there used to be a movie called 10,000 Bedrooms. I think we have like 20,000 bedrooms in Marin that are empty. And we have people that don't have places to live. And somehow that mix has got to change. We're building 12,000 square foot houses in places where instead you could put 8 little places that people could live in, or maybe more than that. And yet we have a lot of NIMBY at things in Marin. Our aging population needs attention also, and that Marin Villages has been really my passion for helping address that, so that people are not isolated and alone and can stay in their homes. So those are real issues I think Marin is facing, and it takes more than just talking about it. You have to join things. You have to get involved, and I don't see a lot of people getting really passionately involved on a widespread basis. There are a few people, but not a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been just great. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. The Marin Women's Hall of Fame is a project of the YWCA of San Francisco and Marin. If you would like to learn more about the Hall of Fame and our honorees, please visit www.mwhf.org.